everyone, I'm recording this after the fact because I realised I went through all of this stuff and I didn't actually even explain at any point while I was doing it what I was even doing. I know, very professional of me. In any case, in the last couple of videos we looked at the alternative market and we talked about making rings, and this video was supposed to be about the process of making rings, but I thought it'd be cool to do it in a way where I could show you that you too could make something like this at home with a minimum investment, with basic things you can find, even cutting your own wood. And yes, you can do all of that. But also in here, I've gone to Hobart, I've done a few different things, so come along on the journey. And sorry that this is the intro you get instead of a nice panoramic shot. I'll cut to something cool.
Ah! Now I'm not Thorin Bradley, but I'm going to get through this Tasmanian Blackwood by hand with a shitty dull axe. I'm not using any fancy tools, just to show you that it can all be done yourself by hand. I thought that cutting wood's such a workout. Oh wait, no, this is the normal Thorin thing, isn't it?
2 hours later.
So after all that, we've just started to hit the heartwood. I'm halfway through, and I need some water. In Tasmania, water comes in yellow cans. You may not know this. It's also carbonated. You know, I've been all over the world. Let me tell you, the water in Tasmania, I give it 4 X's of approval. Turned it over to have a go at the other side, and yes, it is completely coming apart, and I could probably harvest this section. But I really want to go through the whole log at this point. Yeah, we're over halfway through. Time for some Tasmanian Blackwood facts. Tasmanian Blackwood is typically rated at 665 on the Janker Wood Hardness Rating Scale, which makes it slightly less hard than mahogany and slightly more hard than something like a Douglas fir. It's considered a softwood.
I'm gonna blame my brain here. I was hitting wood with an axe for ages. Tasmanian Blackwood is in fact a hardwood.
It's considered good to machine, but it's not considered normally very durable. That said, a lot of people use it to make furniture in Tasmania. And am I stalling from picking up the axe again? Yeah, a little bit. We got there. Done. All right. Next step, take that piece, run a saw through it, and then we have to dry it, which is going to be interesting. Yeah, and I took a chunk out of my hand doing it, but worth it. And when I said it was an old axe, it was blunt as heck. It really is a blunt axe. It is not sharp at all. Okay, so now with our saw, this one I got from a tip shop for $1. We're going to cut a section through our piece of wood. We don't need too much. We only need something that's about this wide, maybe an inch wide. That is possibly even too thick. An inch, 2.5 centimeters, thereabouts. Not ideal, but we got a big enough chunk. I was hoping for more. If I had power tools, this would have been just done. But with a quick sand and a polish, I think this would turn out quite nice.
Now we need to dry the wood out. So it goes into the oven at 100 degrees Celsius, maybe a little over, where it will sit for several hours. You just need to check on it every so often, make sure it doesn't catch fire. Very unlikely at 100 degrees, we're just trying to get all the water and moisture out of it. What happened next was a bit of a disaster. Many of you may know I have fibromyalgia, and some of you may know I was hospitalised the day after I dried the wood out in the oven. This resulted in an impromptu trip to Hobart to go and see a specialist. But I figured, while I was there, why not catch up with some friends, go out and see a band or two, and try and enjoy myself a bit. Except, in the rush, I only grabbed my camera bag and not, you know, clothes, and I was supposed to be going out that night. I guess time for some sudden thrift shopping.
Don't have long. I've got 20 minutes to find something. 20 minutes? No. We're going out. I just want even... We're going out. Do look at him blue. Okay, minor disaster. It doesn't look like they've got any pants in my size. Damn it. Slightly too tight. Okay, $6 for a Connor large slim fit button-up. That's good. If I sound like I'm in a rush, that's because I am in a rush. Ah!
I made it to town, found a park, ran more or less straight down the stairs, headed on to the Twisted Lime, where Plan F were releasing their new EP, Stay Out of My Brain, and they were great, they were amazing. I caught up with some friends who kindly asked to stay off video, so massive thanks to you guys for helping me have an awesome night. You know who you are. I had a really good time, really enjoyed myself, I really needed it. And here's a little snippet from Plan F.
Good magical morning, everyone. I had a really lovely night out. Ultimately, it's now very rainy. It is duck weather. They're over there. And today I'm headed to Salamanca Market. I imagine it's going to be quite quiet because of the aforementioned weather. Going to get a coffee, something nice for breakfast, something not too heavy for breakfast. I'll see you there.
Normally about this point, I'd show you where I was eating and drinking. But I was really disappointed with this particular cafe. They'd been excellent so many times. The coffee was acrid. You can see the look of disappointment on my face there, but the food was lovely. And then I ducked around the corner to head to the Salamanca Market. The Salamanca Market has been running in Hobart since the 1970s, and it's one of Tasmania's most visited tourist attractions. It's won a heap of awards, and there's basically anything you care to name here, from trinkets, food of all different kinds, of all different nationalities. Find clothing, leather goods, jewellery, even fossils. According to the Hobart City Council, Salamanca Market attracts between 25,000 to 40,000 visitors every single Saturday, which is crazy. For a little while, Salamanca Market was the largest open-air market in the Southern Hemisphere, or at least so they claimed. I don't know necessarily if that's true. And I would love to show you some stalls in more detail, but on the theme of things not going smoothly for this video, the Tasmanian weather had other plans for me.
Alright, my trip to Salamanca has been cut short. The rain is coming, and a security guy just said that strong winds are on the way. So I'm going to head back to the car, hopefully avoid all of that. Gee, honestly, that's going to ruin my next couple of hours. We'll figure it out.
I in fact did not work it out. My body worked it out for me and decided that no, I should enjoy another fibro attack. So I went back home the following day, where I started work on the ring again.
It's a couple of days later and it's a little bit colder, but this is for the next step. I need to make up a little cardboard container for our block of wood. I'm going to sit in there like so, and then it's going to be all folded up so we can pour some epoxy over it. Let me show you. So this is where this $2 hobby knife set is going to come in mega handy. See, I knew this would be worth it. I always recommend when you're working with epoxy, wear terrible clothes, because you're going to get stuff all over you and it's not a good time. We'll use that bad boy. So it's just like wrapping a Christmas present. Align it, and then we need to make sure that all of the sides are higher, doesn't have to be much higher, than the edge. So I think something a bit like that will work. So that gives us our little container. And if I'm happy with those dimensions, which I am, we can now take our bit of wood out and fill in our little cup with tape. Why are you putting tape on the inside? Helps stop the epoxy that we're going to be pouring in from sticking as much. That's our little cup. Beautiful. Next step's to pour the epoxy.
There are a bunch of different ways to handle pouring epoxy. Ignore all of the mess behind me. Very ADHD coded. So a bunch of different ways to go about it. Ideally, you would mix all of the epoxy in one go, pour it, and then apply it to your material. You could choose to apply the epoxy after carving down your material so it soaks in properly, but there are a few cracks and things in this wood, so I'm hoping the epoxy will seep in. Again, when you're making things like this, when you're not using modern power tools, it's very likely that the result you will get is just honestly going to be slightly subpar. If you have access to a drill press, a lathe, electric tools, you can get a really nice, neat finish. So all of this is going to be dependent on the quality of our product going in, and then the finish we can get by hand coming out. It is doable. It is completely doable. But this takes about 10 times longer than using modern tools. The two-part epoxy is mixed, poured over, and then I just generously scrape it into all of the cracks. It was quite a cold day, so the epoxy was quite thick. You can heat the epoxy to get it to be a runnier consistency, which is good for this kind of thing, but I was standing by the fact that I wasn't going to use any complicated tools. And I figured a blowtorch counts as a complicated tool. I don't know why I'm torturing myself like this.
So what's my preference with epoxy? I prefer to use a hard, quick-flowing boat epoxy. In the US, I believe a really good brand is Total Boat. You can't really get that here, but there are options that are out there. What I would also suggest is using enough epoxy to basically fill that box so that it is not submerged, but pretty much completely soaking the wood. Not something we can do here today because we're using basic, cheap tools that you can find at a dollar store. So it's another day, and I am fighting in between the rain to get it all done. There's a lot of work to do, and what are you doing? What are you doing? There's a lot of work to do, and very little time to do it, and I've got Merlin going crazy. Let's see how we go. Our step now is to crack it out of our little box, something that can be a little tricky. We may need our knife. Now we're going to mark it out. Normally I wouldn't use a pen, but on the basis of doing the best we can with what we've got, we want to mark out the section of wood that I'm going to use, and then go corner to corner until we find the center. And then we roughly want to have a ring shape around there. One of the few new tools I'm allowing myself is a new coping saw blade, because after the incident with the saw and the wood over there, I have no interest in going through that with blunt equipment. But this is about the most basic tool you could get.
I then proceeded to cut it down into two chunks, one which I left raw, and the other was broken down further into an octagon shape, as close as I can get to a circle with a saw without it actually being circle. That'll save time later.
This doesn't look like much right now, but this gives us the blank starting spot, a couple more bits to rough off, but my next point is to drill a hole straight through the center. As you can see, utmost precision.
And whilst the first step with the pilot hole went very, very smoothly, it turns out the chuck in the old drill does not open far enough to fit the size that I need, so I decided finally, screw it, and got the power drill to just get this thing done. It was driving me mad, okay?
Right. We're having so many problems. It rains every time I try and do anything. It's about to rain again, but we have a hole. Now I can start filing it down.
Let me tell you what, I've gained a whole new respect for people who make things and put them up on YouTube. How the heck do they manage to record it all and show what they're doing and explain it in any kind of reasonable way? I'm struggling here. What I proceeded to do was sand the ever-loving crap out of this by hand. We started with that 40 and then an 80 grit sandpaper. Once I'd knocked the rough edges off it, I then took it out over to the hobby knife, cut the edges down a bit further, beveled it, and tried to make the edges smooth so that when I ran around it with the sandpaper again at higher grits, I could actually get a smooth, rounded finish to it. I had to learn to accept that some of the flaws that were in the wood were just going to stay. There were still some cracks that just would not be filled properly by epoxy, and that's okay, it can just become part of it. This is just an example of what can be done after all. After many, many hours of cutting, polishing, sanding, cutting again, then polishing and sanding again, I ended up with something a bit like this.
Nice and smoothed out. And you can see, focus, the striations of the wood running through it now. So much happier. So the next part is to take this and we're going to fill some of the gaps with epoxy. If this was going to be a ring that was to be sold, I would core out the center a little bit more and put a copper or stainless steel sleeve through the middle. The next step is just to repeat a bunch of the steps we've already taken. So the next thing I'm going to show you is probably the finished product.
Now bear in mind, this was cut from a tree in my front yard and was made entirely using hand tools, with the exception of that drill. And I think it turned out really well. I put a layer of gold leaf over one section and then re-lacquered it with some more epoxy. I think it's turned out quite well. I left it slightly undersized so that I can core it or resize it to whoever might want it in the future. But I think it looks good on a finger. So there you have it. We went from something that looked a little bit like this, which came from a chunk of wood from a fallen dead tree in my yard, to this. And I also used some other Blackwood to just make some Elder Futhark runes, which I think are just fun. There's one, which is also Blackwood and gold. And next time I do this, I'll definitely be using power tools, so I can make one that is actually professional looking, instead of this, where I can personally see all the flaws. I don't have an exit strategy for this video. It's probably going to end suddenly.